Joining me now, representing the 1st Congressional District in Texas, Congressman Louie Gohmert. Congressman, thank you so much for joining me. Congressman, there's a lot to unpack here from my introduction, but first I'll start with these bonuses in possible vacations for teachers. I mean, isn't this money, the COVID-19 relief money, isn't that supposed to be used to get kids back in school, not to hand out bonuses and pay for trips to Hawaii?
Yes, you know it is. It was never supposed to be for anything but COVID relief. But in keeping with the National Democratic Party strategy, for example, taking a $1.9 trillion COVID bill and only spending 9% of that for COVID relief and COVID-related things, I guess the Golden State is just following the National Democratic Party's lead, and that is spending money on every kind of wish list for Democrats that they could want. But they bring up science, and yet they're the ones that are not following it. It is outrageous what's going on, and who's being hurt? The children, the one they say they care about, but everything indicates, all science indicates, the schools should be open. The children are being harmed by not being allowed to go back to school. And so it really is, Stephanie, it's just an outrage that they would even consider such a thing when the kids' futures are at stake.
Yeah, it is such an outrage. But apparently it sounds like there's no rules against the school districts using the money how they please. But considering this is taxpayer dollars and borrowed money, like this shouldn't be allowed. I mean, they should be held accountable.
Well, they should be. And that is another one of the problems, Stephanie, when we nationalize schools. It is supposed to be it's supposed to be locally controlled. Under the 10th Amendment, since education is not mentioned, it should be under state and local control. And it would be interesting if this were all local money, if they would be doing the same exact thing. I don't think so, but it would at least be their own taxpayers' money where their boards would be held accountable. So we need to get back to local control, and you would see a lot of this stuff disappear. They wouldn't be wasting funds.
Congressman, what did you think of that report of that business having the judge approving and authorizing for the business's water and electricity to be shut down, despite the fact that restaurants in the area are allowed to reopen, at least at like a 25% capacity? So they're like going back and punishing this business because apparently the business wasn't like following the COVID rules at the time. I mean, power and electricity, water, everything, that is absolute insanity.
Well, it is, but and the person that was interviewed, he said it was communism. It really is fascism. It's totalitarianism. It's Orwellianism. It is a state taking control over everything. And you got to remember, though, in this COVID crisis, that this is the first time in American history freedom in America was set aside, and people who were not sick were quarantined, had their businesses destroyed. That's never happened in American history. So it's understandable businesses that like to live free would react this way. Their families are being destroyed, but it is a Democratic tactic to make everybody in the country as reliant on the government as possible. They're going to make us all indentured servants, and that's their strategy. We have to beg to them for any little thing we get to do or receive.
Yeah. I listened to a recent interview of Dr. Fauci's where he's talking about how it's like risky business and that some of the states are easing their lockdown restrictions. He's totally against it. And then I was just thinking, it was just a couple days ago that was like the 1-year anniversary of his whole comments on how you don't need to wear a mask. Then you know, over the months, it was like, you need to wear a mask. And then as of recently, he's like, you need to wear 2 or 3 masks. I'm so confused as to Dr. Fauci's advice, because he seems to be continuing to be getting it wrong. And there are a lot of people who are saying that like he just wants COVID-19 to continue to be in the conversation so that he can be on TV. What do you think?
Well, I think he's the textbook example of often wrong, but never in doubt. He has never been in doubt, but he has been wrong over and over. And I do think it's appropriate to follow the science. But if you try to follow Fauci, you're just going in circles. You're not following anything but a circle. So we need to have somebody besides Fauci making the call. He still needs to be accountable for the $3 million he sent to the Wuhan clinic to work on potential making biological weapons. We need to know from him, why in the heck would you ever do that? You may have been complicit in this whole disaster, but he's got a lot to answer for, and he just goes in circles and doesn't give straight answers.
Yeah, speaking of masks, in Texas, Texas apparently lost at court. Austin's mask mandate is to stay in place for at least 2 more weeks. So I guess the argument for Austin, they're suggesting that, they should have their own rights. What are your thoughts on easing the restrictions on masks in each state?
I think it's past time to have done that. But Austin, often referred to as the People's Socialist Republic of Austin, they see things in a whole different light. They kind of lean more toward Mao and Stalin than they do Washington and Madison and Lincoln. So it's understandable that they're going to fight to give up any control over everyone's person. But the judge just made a temporary ruling, and we do elect our judges. And in Austin, they're going to elect liberal Democrats for judges. So that gives a little background as well. But it's temporary, and there are courts above that are not liberal leftist jurists or legislators in robes. So we'll see what happens from here. But it is past time to allow our local governments and our state governments to take control and say, enough already, you've caused enough damage from Washington.
Congressman, Nancy Pelosi continues to refer to what's going on at the border a challenge. You're in Texas, it's a border state. Would you consider it a challenge? Probably not, but I'll let you respond.
Well, every crisis is a challenge, and this is a crisis, and it is absolutely an extraordinary challenge. But let's look at the cause. It's named Joe Biden, the president. He has lured people to their detriment, and it is outrageous. Stephanie, he says we have a national COVID emergency. Okay, but either we do or we don't, because he is allowing, and one estimate was 25% of those coming in illegally have COVID. And he locks down America. This president has no problem locking down Americans. This is fine. He's good doing that, destroying businesses. That's fine for him. And then he says, but we're going to allow all these people that are breaking the law to just come in, swarm all over the country, because they don't just stay in Texas or California or Arizona, New Mexico. When they come in, some stay in groups there wherever they can house them, but they're being also shipped all over the country. And so it is just outrageous. It's got to stop. He's got to understand the damage he's doing.
Yeah, well, and they have to acknowledge and recognize that there is an actual crisis at the border. And I get a crisis is a challenge, but they're downplaying it because back in 2018, under the Trump administration, they called it a crisis. So I understand what they're doing. It's kind of like, they're messing around with words, trying to make it not seem like a big deal so that they're not held accountable. What was interesting was the vice president of the National Border Patrol Council, Arto Cueto, he was talking about the people who actually aren't being apprehended. So he said there was some 40,000 people that he thinks were gotaways. So these are the people that aren't even being counted. So the situation is actually probably much worse than we think.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And I've been down there all hours of the day and night, and I can tell you, the Border Patrol, they know. They will have a group come across and actually look for the Border Patrol. And then they'll have to call in other Border Patrol to come in and help process these people. And they know, and they tell me, look, when we get a big group, we know there are either other people coming in that are high valued that don't want to be caught, and they know we'll all be taking care of the big group they just sent. or they're bringing drugs or something even worse into the country. So the Border Patrol knows, and I think it's rather interesting. The Democrats were just saying last week in hearings, most of the drugs that come in, it's been documented, they're coming through the public ports of entry. But Stephanie, the government does not know what they don't know, but the Border Patrolman will tell you there are drugs flooding in every time we have to deal with and process in a major, large group. So it is really dangerous. It is a crisis, and it needs to be dealt with. So whoever is telling Biden what to sign and say needs to encourage him to go ahead and call it a crisis and take care of it.
And you're so right. If you think about it, there's only so many resources that are given to the Border Patrol agents. There's only so many Border Patrol agents. So if they're totally distracted with thousands of people at the border, yeah, obviously drug cartels will definitely take advantage of that. Well, Congressman, we appreciate your insight. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks, Stephanie.